There's a common consensus I see online that the God of War series was crass and overindulgent on subjects typically geared towards a young, masculine audience. The usual suspects crop up in discussion, as they do with any controversy surrounding games, sex, and violence. God of War in particular was called out for over-glorifying the violence, which, to be fair, it does. The audience is meant to revel in the gruesome depictions of decapitation, torture, and general cruelty performed against anyone and everyone that Kratos comes into contact with. The thing that I think most people miss though when viewing the God of War series from this angle is the depth that can be found within its main character. Kratos is a violent, emotionally detached, spiteful destroyer, but hidden just underneath that and only shown for brief moments across God of War 2 and 3. We can find the root of these actions and uncover just who Kratos really is. Let's start off with a quick summary of where Kratos is at by the end of the first God of War so that we can understand who he is by the time the second game starts. Kratos was an ordinary Spartan warrior who had climbed the ranks of the army to become one of the most feared and accomplished generals in Greece. He would rip his enemies to shreds and lay waste to villages until one fateful day when he was outmatched by a force too vast for him to overcome. With his life close to ending, he called out to Ares for help, and from that day forth he was bound to serve the God of War and was gifted great power. With the chains from the Blade of Chaos seared to his arms, he would go on to become more merciless than ever, committing vile acts in the name of Ares. Kratos' servitude was to come to an end soon though, as Ares tricked him into slaying his own family while raiding an enemy village, and Kratos swore revenge. He crossed the desert, climbed atop the Titan Kronos, and faced the challenges within the temple upon his back to achieve the power contained within Pandora's box and slayed the God of War. Upon Ares' defeat, Kratos soon found himself bored with his role as the new God of War. Athena had granted him full godhood and promoted him to take Ares' place. However, some of the other gods on Olympus weren't happy with how Kratos was acting in the role and conspired against him. This is the opening we find ourselves playing through in God of War 2. So we start here with Kratos as a sympathetic yet still quite surface level character. He has very simple desires that stem from the guilt of killing his wife and child. This guilt manifests in him through violence, revenge, and anger. Most of his anger gets pointed to the gods, but some of it gets unleashed against those who are not particularly powerful or against Kratos, but simply those who get in his way. This isn't a new thing though, Kratos has always been like this. He's been angry and violent throughout his whole life, even before being betrayed by Ares, but now it takes on a sort of arrogance around it now that he's dealing with the gods. The mortals are below him, his task is more important than theirs, his mission, his life, matters more than theirs. So aside from the story, what tells us all this? I think it's important to look at the combat of God of War to see what that can tell us about Kratos' character. The majority of Kratos' attacks are done with the Blades of Chaos, or in God of War 3 the Blades of Exile. I'm not going to separate these two as they are functionally interchangeable, so I'll just call them the Blades of Chaos from now on. The Blades of Chaos are not designed in the traditional way that most swords are. They are a lot shorter than your average blade, and they're attached to chains. The closest thing to these I can find in real life is a weapon known as a Kusari Gamma, which was a sickle attached to one end of a chain invented somewhere between 1336 and 1573. The actual year of creation is unknown. The only problem with it is that there's no evidence of it actually being used in combat, since it could easily harm allies and it couldn't go through armour. Hilariously enough though, these were actually banned in 1990 under the Firearms and Offensive Weapons Act in Ireland. What the fuck was going on in Ireland in the late 80s for this to be written into the law? What these tell us about Kratos though is that despite appearing to just be a mindless brute, he's actually an incredibly skilled warrior. To be able to use a weapon like this, you need to have practiced with it a lot, and really taken the time to learn how to wield it without hurting yourself. Many of the attacks would also require a certain amount of control over momentum to have the blades snap out as fast as Kratos does. Many of the attacks sweep wide and hit many targets at once, which is great given the amount of enemies that bombard you. It would be very easy for the blades to be overpowered, but due to the balance of how enemy attacks are handled, they manage to feel powerful while not making every fight too easy. The way that enemies are balanced across the God of War series is that they do not stun when you hit them. When you hit the enemy, it is still entirely possible for them to come back and attack you. I initially criticised this in my God of War 1 video, but as I played through God of War 2 and 3, it was something I came to appreciate. If enemies were stunned when you hit them, it would be possible to stun-lock entire groups of enemies with how wide some of your moves can swing. So instead your magic abilities are used to stun and give you a small bit of time to breathe. Being attacked mid-combo also helps to make the fights more strategic. Any attack you do can be cancelled to dodge, except for named combos and your L1 moves. This means that you have to choose very carefully when to use these more powerful moves, because if you start it and then get attacked, you are locked into the animation and damage becomes unavoidable. This creates an interesting dynamic where you can be dominating a fight one moment but mistime a more powerful combo move and suddenly you're being thrown around the arena like a ragdoll. This is a very fine line that you not only walk as the player, but Kratos walks as well. There are several points throughout the God of War series where it appears that Kratos is on top of things, only to be knocked down a peg or two within moments. The opening to God of War 2 comes to mind when he's crushed by the Colossus of Rhodes before being impaled by the Blade of Olympus. The gameplay and story mirror one another really well in this regard. Kratos is also shown as a resilient character. No matter how many times he's nearly killed or set back, he always gets straight back up and continues to fight. Along this same line, he is bombarded with puzzle after puzzle after puzzle across the series, which shows another kind of resilience, that no matter how difficult the puzzle is or how stuck he gets in his attempts to solve it, he keeps going. Another example of mirroring, but this time between Kratos and the player. It is a well-established fact in pop culture that the Greek gods are dicks. It's actually the thing that draws me to them and makes me think that out of all sets of deities, they are the most likely to be real, shortly followed by the Norse gods. However, in God of War, this dickheadedness is pushed to extremes, with the gods being more self-serving than ever. In the book Pantheon by Caroline Lawrence, there's an interesting line in the foreword about the function that the Greek gods serve to humanity.
As human society evolved, the gods and goddesses reflected human behaviour. People moulded gods in their image.
I think we can see this brought forward into the version of the Greek mythology that we play through in these games. As we as a society have become accustomed to seeing acts of cruelty be performed in movies, games, TV shows, etc., a version of the Greek gods for the modern day would have them as needlessly cruel compared to civilizations of the past. This is one of the few game series I've played through where there is no out-and-out good character. Kratos is our protagonist, but I don't think we're supposed to side with him by the end of God of War 3. Even those we refer to as allies are not immune to this dickheadedness. Athena attempts to protect Zeus despite helping us get to the position of being able to kill him in the first place, and Gaia betrays us to reignite a long-ended conflict and get revenge on the father of Olympus. The only character across the whole series who is not a dick is Pandora, but that's because she embodies pure hope, so it would feel wrong to have her be an arsehole. I'll come back to her a little bit more later. By the time we reach the end of God of War 2, Kratos has gained very little in the way of depth. He is remorseful over the killing of Athena, who was his only ally on Olympus, but aside from that, not much has changed. He's more spiteful than he was in the first game, with him now amassing an army of titans led by Gaia to storm Mount Olympus directly after failing to kill Zeus. Between the games, however, there is a subtle shift in Kratos' character. Where in God of War 2 you can still side with him because the gods have stabbed him in the back and through the chest, in God of War 3 he is more cruel than ever, stopping at nothing to achieve his singular goal of revenge. He goes on a bloody killing spree throughout the entire Pantheon. The main gods you kill are Poseidon, Hades, Helios, Hermes, Hera, Hercules, a lot of H names I'm noticing. You kill the blacksmith, Hephaestus, Kronos, Gaia, and Zeus. This isn't even mentioning in the last game when we killed other prominent figures like Icarus and Prometheus. The world in God of War 3 is one that is slowly destroyed piece by piece at the hand of Kratos, and this turns him from a character we sympathise with to someone we are supposed to be disgusted by, and honestly when Athena's ghost comes back and kills him at the end, I thought he kinda deserved it. It's a really interesting shift in characterization, and I thought it was handled beautifully. Even within this shift though, there is a depth. Later in the game we are tasked with unleashing the power of Pandora's box yet again, but to do that we need to find Hephaestus' daughter and the box's namesake, Pandora. Upon finding her though, Kratos is struck with the revelation that she would have to die to unleash the power, and in a strange twist, doesn't want her to do it despite it serving his goals. In fact, he nearly ends his own life during his fight with Zeus in trying to stop her, but in the end his efforts are in vain. This small piece of characterization gives us a last reflective moment near the end of our journey to weigh up the good and the bad things that Kratos has done, and come to our own conclusion on what fate he would deserve. I personally felt that his death was justified, but someone else might come to the conclusion that his care for Pandora was enough to redeem him and show that there was still some humanity left in the Ghost of Sparta. Obviously this is not the end of the God of War series, and we know that Kratos would go on to more than redeem himself in the 2018 God of War and its sequel Ragnarok. But I think that the Greek trilogy offers its own fascinating insight into the character if you just dig a little bit deeper and stop focusing on the violence for a few moments. I probably won't cover anything else in this series. You can consider this my video about God of War 2 and 3 in place of my usual style. It just felt like these games wouldn't work if I covered them the same way I cover everything else, so a slight change was needed. I hope it was entertaining and it got you to think about the Greek era Kratos in a way that you maybe hadn't before. But that's all from me for now. Good night.